It looks like we are going to see some real fight very soon. But for now, we have to wait because that group decided to go from there. But before they left with a warning to Bjorn that they will come. After that, Bjorn and Erwin start running towards the portal, and Bjorn tells Erwin not to stop until she reaches the portal. She runs at the fastest speed she can while asking Bjorn if the four from earlier are gone, or whether they'd chase them. Bjorn remembers how they threatened him that he would get revenge for the essence, and even if they didn't follow them, they would probably end up in the same place, which confuses Erwin. Bjorn tells her that they were a party of 4, which is a good number for a second-floor raid. But they were loitering around the entrance, which means they were planning to go back to the first floor and leave the labyrinth, just like them. They were doing the same thing as them, and Erwin appreciates Bjorn's ability to think critically. Well, for others, he is a barbarian after all. As they run, Erwin senses a group of goblins 50 meters away from their location, and Bjorn says that they will avoid them. However, Erwin tells Bjorn that they can't run because the goblins are coming towards them. Bjorn is shocked to hear this, because the goblins hadn't found them once during the past few days. So how did they find them now? He wondered if this was a coincidence. So they decided to go in the opposite direction. As Bjorn made a quick turn, Erwin was agreeing with him, but suddenly an arrow comes flying towards her. Bjorn grabbed her by the shirt and pulled her backward, but the arrow wasn't from a goblin archer. She says she was going to dodge it herself, and Bjorn says that it's the guys from earlier who shot at them. He tells Erwin that they lured the goblins to their location, and they're waiting on the opposite side. They were planning to tire them out with goblins, and now they had no choice but to fight. He told Erwin to use her powers. She is confused as to what powers he means, and he tells her to use the essence's power that she had acquired by eating the goblin archer's essence. You see, every essence has its own special ability, and since Erwin had absorbed the goblin archer's essence, it would give her special powers. It would increase Erwin's stats in many ways, as you can see on the stat window. Alongside that, it adds a passive and active skill, which can be quite useful in situations like this. She had gotten a passive skill that made all her arrows poisonous, while also giving her an active skill that made her stealthy. Erwin tells him that she doesn't know how to use it, and he just looks at her and tells her that it's already working. Erwin begins to glow blue with the essence surging through her body. She can finally feel the powers of the goblin archer. Her active skill thief step was now in use. Bjorn looked at her and wondered whether the skills work just by willing them, or did they need to say something to trigger it. Meanwhile, Erwin is just enthralled by her new powers. He hands her his bag, telling her to keep it safe. He was going to handle the goblins on his own, and she can look for the guy with the crossbow. Erwin is worried for Bjorn because it would be too dangerous on his own. However, he doesn't care at the moment. He tells her that there is no time to think. He tells her to stay hidden, and when he gives the signal, she must kill the guy with the crossbow. There would only be one shot. After that, he runs into the forest towards the goblins without even telling her what the signal would be. After some time, he stops, because goblins were surrounding him from the left while rushing into the goblins headfirst. Bjorn notices how those guys haven't shown themselves since they shot at them with a crossbow. Early on, he assumed that they would show themselves once he killed all of the goblins, and he began the killing spree. Blood splatters were everywhere as Bjorn was killing the group of goblins. There were a dozen of them. 2 of the goblins were swordsmen or warriors, but there were no arrows flying towards him. There were probably no archers, or so he thought. But an arrow comes flying his way, so he blocked it with his shield, and he now knows there were archers too. Then he felt something pierce his back. It was a goblin with a dagger who stabbed him from behind. He threw the goblin off and bashed its head in with his shield. He was fighting the goblins to the best of his abilities. But he also remembered the crossbow guy was there too, and he didn't have Erwin to help him this time. The injuries were piling up as they were cutting Bjorn up. It was looking like the Attack on Titans. But he didn't let up though. as he slammed his hammer onto the goblins and killed them all. They turned into smoke, and he realized that things were getting a bit too dangerous for him. Suddenly, 2 arrows shot in his direction at once. He had to dodge them, but he realized that they were both different markings. One belonged to a goblin archer, and the other arrow was from the crossbow guy. It was impossible to block both arrows, and now he had to pick and choose which arrow would be more dangerous to get hit with. So he decided to block the crossbow bolt, and as he blocked it, the goblin arrow had pierced through his elbow because he simply couldn't have blocked shots from both sides. His arm was wounded and bleeding, not to mention the goblin arrows seemed to have been poisoned. His arm was turning purple, and he couldn't feel any movement within it. He only had his right arm, and he needed to choose between his weapons now. So he let go of the hammer, knowing it wouldn't be much help. He pulled the arrow out of his elbow and chose the shield. It was his original weapon. He knew that the real enemy was that group of scums. If it weren't for them, the goblins wouldn't have been much of a threat to him. He could easily kill goblins with the hammer, but the shield was necessary to protect himself from those crossbow bolts. Bjorn kept slamming into them with his shield. He was flinging them around like they were nothing, sending them flying far away with each hit. But it was not enough. Eventually, he had enough, and he got angry. As he gave the goblins an angry look, the remaining goblins began to run away. As they ran away, Bjorn had one slight moment of rest. He managed to hold on long enough, and he knew he didn't have to chase them down. The group started to emerge from the bushes. They were hiding in there for too long. Their leader smiled and looked smug. He respected Bjorn for getting rid of all of those goblins on his own. He found it impressive and quite unexpected as he walked out with his 2 other companions. The crossbow guy didn't come with them, but he noticed and asked him the whereabouts of Erwin. With anger, he just tells them to come and fight him. Then their leader says that it is truly impressive that he still has energy despite fighting all of those goblins. However, he was sure that Bjorn was severely injured by this point, and gives him the option to tell him where Erwin is, and they would let him go. Bjorn smiles. He wondered if they thought he was stupid, but Bjorn, laughing, annoyed them, and they decided that they should fight him first and torture him later for the answers. He tells his crew not to let their guard down, even if Bjorn is injured. They were going to take this fight the same way as they would while hunting a giant monster. They decided to rush and attack Bjorn as he held his shield up, ready for their attack. But his situation was dire. His left arm wasn't moving, and he was going up against 3 explorers. He wondered whether Erwin found the crossbow archer yet, but he needed to send the signal now. But he knew that the signal had to be something unique, something that this world's people would recognize. He knew what he had to do. He smiled as he raised his poisoned arm up and showed them his middle finger. As he put his arm up, he looked very pleased with the signal. Well, it's a good one. What do you think will happen if Erwin got confused with it? As all of you know how clumsy she is. I also have a story, a dark fantasy one. So I just want to know how much darker I keep it. It is going to be similar to Remonster. But if I make it too much darker, I have to create another channel for it, or I release a novel with a darker version and video with a lighter version. Please tell me,